السلام.
Shalom.
هيوا. خي بينك.
Mer.
Salam.
Hög.
Pace.
Dis.
Pat.
Fred.
Irine.
Meir.
Kalayaan.
Shampoo.
Ammonia.
سكون.
Bas.
Samer.
Herdamayan.
Frieden.
صلح.
Vrede.
سلام.
Paz.
هيوا. La pace.
Pokoj.
الأمان.
Freedom.
السلام. Mir.
Heavy. Latte.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله يحفظك. الله يسلمك. صوافي ولا؟ يا مرحبا في الصوافي، كيف حالك طيب؟ طبعا اسمحوا لي اخواني باسمي وباسم أسرة ترند ارحب بكم في قاعة السلام. هذه القاعة تم تدشينها في نفس هذا اليوم، في يوم السلام. تم تدشين هذه القاعة، واليوم بعد مرور عام ندشنها بهذه طبعا الفعالية بالشراكة مع أخي وصديقي طبعا محمد أحمد الكعبي، الداعم الرئيسي لترندز منذ البداية صراحة. والاتحاد تدعمنا دعم كبير طبعا في فعالياتنا، وأيضا في طبعا كل ما نقوم به من يعني سواء كانت دراسات، سواء كانت محاضرات، وأيضا ورش عمل في هذا الموضوع. شاكر لكم جميعا.
I would like to thank you all for your presence, and I would like to express my gratitude to you in attending with us this celebration, and I would like to welcome Dr. Omar, Dr. Mohammed Kamel, and our colleagues in Al-Ittihad newspaper. And I would like to welcome the colleagues in Trends, Dr. Khayoun, and also our big supporter behind the scenes, His Excellency Mr. Cruz, and also this partnership is led by Mohammed Khalfan Al-Sawafi, and special thanks to my brother Hamad, because this idea was born and it was very small, and now we are implementing it on the ground. I would like to thank all the fellows in Trends research and training, and I would like to thank Sumaya Al-Hadrami, Sharifa, and Aisha, and all the colleagues who exercise tremendous efforts in order to make this happen in Trends Research and Advisory Company. And of course, there are colleagues behind the scenes who are working collaboratively, and you will see our action in our different platforms. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you. In the beginning, I would like to thank Trends Research and Advisory. It is a nice opportunity to be among you. Before we start the event of today, I would like to mention two things. First is that this event is coinciding with the Day for Tolerance, the International Day for Tolerance, and of course we will seize this opportunity in this seminar to answer many questions, including what should we do, what do we need to do. So we hope that we help in understanding the society and educating the society about that. I will stick to the agenda with due respect, I would be sticking to the agenda. So we will start with Dr. Muhammad Abdullah Al Ali, the CEO of Trends Research and Advisory. You have the floor, Doctor. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Your Highness Nahyan bin Mubarak Al Nahyan, the member of the Cabinet, the Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you. I would like to welcome you all in Trends Research and Advisory, and I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to take part in this seminar. And this is in coordination with Al-Ittihad, a newspaper, under the theme promoting the culture of peace and tolerance in the world. What do we need to do? This event is conducted in coincidence with the International Day for Peace and Tolerance, which is celebrated by the United Nations and the world in September 21st. We know that tolerance and coexistence and peace is the strong basis of living together in order to have a joint response at the international level in order to counter all the threats and the challenges that we are witnessing, and especially the threats that are threatening the humanity. Including the conflicts that are happening in several parts of the world, in addition to the climate change threats. And of course, there are these pandemics that are threatening the humanity, in addition to several other conflicts which necessitate that we work together in order to counter them. And I think that through peace and tolerance and coexistence and accepting the other, the societies and communities can overcome all difficulties and can rectify the stereotypes and establish new norms on how to work together in a way that serves the interest of everyone and on the basis of win-win situation. We can also enhance these values and counter the hatred speech and also achieve prosperity for all the communities and societies in the world. And of course, in order to make this happening, it's not an easy task. It requires determination by the peoples and leaders. And we noticed how the Abraham agreement between Israel and United Arab Emirates, and by the way, we are celebrating the first anniversary of this event in boosting the peace in the region. And it's why we have to continue working together with intellectual, political, media, and cultural entities in order to benefit all the humanity with the prosperity and the peace and the tolerance. Ladies and gentlemen, our intention is to continue working with Al-Ittihad newspaper, which is our major partner, and especially with Hamad Al-Kaabi, the editor-in-chief of Al-Ittihad. This stems from our belief that we can work together in order to promote the values of peace and tolerance. We strive to do that in all the activities that we conduct. Again, I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to take part in this high-profile seminar, and I am sure that the opinions and insights you will share with us will help us reach our objective, which is promoting peace and tolerance in the world. I would like also to express my thanks and gratitude, especially the colleagues in Al-Ittihad newspaper, and at the top of them, Hamad Al-Kaabi, the editor-in-chief, in addition to the great team of colleagues in Trends Research and Advisory who worked effortless in order to make this successful. Dr. Hamad Al-Kaabi, you have the floor. In the beginning, I would like to thank Dr. Muhammad Abdullah Al Ali for his encouraging speech in this particular day, which is blessed in our view. I would like to say that the culture of peace and tolerance is the theme of our seminar and symposium today, and this is happening on the occasion of the International Day for Peace and Tolerance. And I would like to reiterate that this value is deeply rooted in the vision of UAE and the people of UAE. Peace has always been embraced by the three Abraham religions because it is a high human value. It's not a mere slogan, but it is a practice and a vision that aims to serve everyone in order to populate properly the earth. In the UAE, we do not talk only about peace and tolerance, but we live it day after the other. And in the tolerance we exercise and we practice, we try to coexist successfully with everyone living here for work, for investment, or for tourism. Tolerance and peace is a deeply rooted vision in the UAE, which is pivoting around the human being. And we embrace an insight to help all the humans throughout the world during the pandemics and also during the political conflict in order to help solving the conflict and zeroing the problems without any agenda. We have several initiatives that are constructive, and we started these initiatives since the inception of our union. In 2019, we established this pact of tolerance, and also we announced the Abraham House, which includes worshiping spaces for three religions. And also we have several initiatives that aim to enhance and boost the tolerance and celebrate communicating and coexisting with the others. When there was this announcement of relations between Israel and UAE and the signing of the agreement in September 15th, 2020. Since that time, we have promoted a new reality, which is collaborating in order to counter all the challenges in agriculture, in waters, in advanced technology, in energy and climate change. And after 1 year of signing the Abraham Agreement, we signed 60 agreement with Israel in order to boost the collaboration in artificial intelligence, logistics, and tourism, transportation, healthcare, environment, agricultural development, and also irrigation and steel. The Abraham Accord started a new phase of collaboration in the region, and of course we know that Bahrain did the same with Israel, in addition to Sudan and Morocco. And our objective is to work forward peacefully, lovingly. And of course, we mobilize all our outlets in the media in order to build the bridges of communication and dialogue with others, regardless of who they are, in order to raise awareness and to educate others, especially the youth, about the threat of extremism and radicalization, because we want to see a generation that knows the fruits of tolerance. We want a generation that respects each other and considers this diversity, richness in our humanity. And in the Al-Ittihad newspaper, we have covered the visit of Pope Francis, His Holiness Pope Francis, to Abu Dhabi, and the signing of the Pact of the Human brotherhood, and that was also followed by the signing of the Abraham Agreement in Washington. And there was an article in Yidiot Aharnot about peace, and that was the first initiative of its kind in the region on the occasion of a historic event. There was an article of the editor-in-chief of Al-Ittihad in Yidiot Aharnot, and we took part in a seminar and a symposium with Yidiot Aharnot, and we did the same with other Israeli media outlets. It is worth noting that the newspaper presents its audiences with the fruits and outcomes of the signing of this agreement of peace. Nowadays, the peoples of the region are in dire need for a future that is not led by hatred but by hope, in a way that mobilizes all the peoples to face together the challenges of the future, and also to achieve an economy that can help the revenues for the investment and the good of the peoples, not to foment conflict. Our conclusion is that we are deeply convinced that peace and tolerance will create environment of technology and innovation, and this will serve the humans. At the end, I would like to reiterate that promoting peace and tolerance is a joint responsibility, not only for media and education, but for every single one in the society, regardless of their role and their position in the world. When we strive to promote the culture of peace and tolerance by words and deeds, this notion and value will be our path, and the world will benefit from the fruits of tolerance. I would like also to thank His Highness Nahyan bin Mubarak Al Nahyan, the Minister of Tolerance, and I thank him for his participation, and I would like to thank as well Dr. Muhammad Abdullah Al Ali for working with us in order to organize this symposium. I would like to thank everyone who accepted our invitation, and this is in order to celebrate the day for peace and tolerance. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you very much for your speech in which you shared with us our experience and the experience of the United Arab Emirates in promoting the culture of tolerance. Now we move to the opening address of His Highness Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan, the Cabinet Member and the Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence in the United Arab Emirates.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, in this international symposium held in celebration of the International Peace Day, we join together in examining our shared responsibility for achieving tolerance, peace, and human fraternity in our world. This symposium is, in addition, a call to the world from the United Arab Emirates to champion peace and tolerance. The United Arab Emirates is eager to join with other countries and organizations in support of tolerance and peaceful coexistence. We are ready to share our experience and to gain from others a wider understanding of the universal power of peace and tolerance. This symposium gives us that opportunity. The UN 75 Declaration calls for a move from a climate of multinationalism, conflict, and injustice to a culture of multilateralism, peace, and security for the good of all humankind. We in the UAE echo this call. As a country, the UAE is, without a doubt, one of the most peaceful, prosperous, and tolerant countries in the world. This is the legacy of our founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, a harmonious country that is completely open. It is open to all people, irrespective of their culture, religion, ethnicity, gender, or creed. As a result, the United Arab Emirates has produced unparalleled economic growth accompanied by social and political stability, with constantly broadening the opportunities for our country's citizens and residents alike. It is our sincere hope to see a similar description apply to all countries of the world. Yet regional and global conditions continue to challenge us. World population is becoming ever more diverse and divisive. The absence of peace and tolerance persists. Cultural differences and economic difficulties derail cooperation and lead to bitter competition. Religious differences provoke suspicion, where it should promote appreciation for our common quest for spiritual fulfillment. It sometimes appears that our cultural, economic, and religious differences have become sources of intractable conflict rather than the basis for mutual respect and a common ground for problem solving. I speak to you today as the Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence in the United Arab Emirates, where peace and tolerance are essential components of our society. We know that peace and tolerance do not flourish in the absence of wise actions. We are trying to be wise. For example, my ministry and my country are focused on ensuring that educational experience of the young men and women in the UAE results in their comprehending the virtues of peace and tolerance and the way in which these virtues lead to an enlightened understanding of the identity and the difference of human beings. We are likewise promoting tolerance in all forms of communication. We wish to build local and global partnerships based on a tolerance and human fraternity in pursuit of human progress and prosperity. In 2019, the UAE hosted His Holiness Pope Francis and His Eminence, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyib, together and with the strong support of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. They issued the Abu Dhabi Declaration on Human Fraternity. That document asks everyone to commit themselves, and I quote, to work strenuously to spread the culture of tolerance and of living together in peace, putting an end to wars, environmental decay, and moral and cultural decline. The Declaration emphasizes that peace and tolerance promote the qualities and experiences that unite rather than divide all peoples and enables a shared stake in public well-being and happiness. In the spirit of this symposium, aligned well with the spirit of the Human Fraternity Declaration, that there is hope for a new era of tolerance and peace in our world, for this new era of peace and tolerance to take root. It is supremely urgent that we not only understand the bonds that unite us as members of a global community, but that we actively promote and reinforce them. We must also work together to promote the inclusion of all religions of the world in the progress of humanity. We must work together to eradicate religious and cultural misunderstandings. We must encourage reform in our societies, eradicate poverty, achieve safety and security, and open economic opportunities to all citizens. We must unleash the power of education as an effective force for building positive relationships, dispelling stereotypical attitudes, and nurturing new ways of thinking. We must also help make peace, tolerance, and human fraternity areas of innovation and initiative and causes for joint action and effective participation of all for the benefit of all. We must celebrate successful models around the world that demonstrate that peace and tolerance within diverse human society is a positive and creative force for development and stability. I would like to thank you all for your strong commitment to the well-being of humanity as the world continues to go through the COVID-19 pandemic. The importance of peace, tolerance, and human fraternity looms larger than ever as global principles that are essential to safety and successfully navigating this global crisis. On this International Peace Day, let us renew our conviction that tolerance and peace will sustain us and will provide us with the energy, dedication, and resolve to preserve and to succeed. Let us keep in mind our capacity to bring great positive change to our world as we act together for a common cause.
We'll now start this debate. I do believe that the three opening speeches, as well as this video, has really paved the way for the discussion that we'll have. And then we will start our segments. But let us agree on the following. Usually, the moderator is always accused of being a dictator, but this is necessary for that everyone can be able to respect his 10-minute time that is allocated for his intervention. So I do believe that we will respect that. So now we start with this first theme, religious discourse and the importance of confronting hate speech and extremism. I now give the floor to Monsignor Ioannis Lahdi Gaid, the former personal secretary to His Holiness the Pope of the Catholic Church and member of the Higher Committee for Human Fraternity. You have the floor, Monsignor. Thank you so much for all of you. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. And thank you for Hamad Al-Kaabi. I would also like to thank all the presenters. First and foremost, I would like to send you all the salutations of His Holiness, the Pope of the Catholic Church. And he always said that all these measures really tries in spreading peace, tolerance, and human fraternity. And it also leads to decreasing hate and intolerance. Today, we are holding this symposium under the title Protecting the Culture of Peace and Tolerance in the World. What do we need to do? I will try to showcase some practical points that we really need to be undertaking in order to be living in peace and in order to be able to have such spread peace. What's quite important is that we are debating what we can do and not what others need to do. So it is very difficult for people to really have an introspective point of view in order to try to see where he is trying to fail and in order to improve himself. We know that the peace is something we are seeking, but we cannot only wish for it. We also need to work assiduously for that. We also need to focus on our strong points as well as things that need to be spread. For example, we are meeting in a land that the founder, Sheikh Zayed, may he rest in peace, wanted to build on tolerance, fraternity, and mutual respect. It is no secret that His Holiness the Pope of the Catholic Church, as well as the great Mufti, have wanted to sign on the Human Fraternity document on this land in order to encourage such a discourse. This was also reiterated by His Holiness the Pope while talking about the UAE. The Pope says here, and in a few years, and because of wisdom, the desert has become a prosperous and hospitable place. The desert that was a barricade and an obstacle has become a place for meeting between cultures and religions. And we are witnessing the major changes in other states that were more extremist, but now we see how there are measures in order to be open more on the media, in culture, in civilization, as well as respecting the rights of women and minorities. The world does not respect any violations of human rights. Our youth and the upcoming generation do not accept anymore any retardedness, and we are no longer talking about the expressions that we used to accept, but now they are asking questions and they are revolting and they are trying to stop anything that might hamper us to reaching what other countries have reached in terms of openness and tolerance and equality. We are here in order to dialogue, to debate, and in order to take very wise and brave measures in order to respect and to improve. The Human Fraternity document that was signed in Abu Dhabi represent an answer to answer the question of the symposium. What do we need to do? This is why I will mention some points that are stemming from this document, as well as the 10 rules in order to spread peace and tolerance in the world. 1. No violence in the name of God. How many crimes have been perpetrating and are being perpetrating in the name of God? The document says that we are asking anyone to use religions in hatred and extremism and racism and blind hate, and to stop using the name of God in order to justify distortion as well as killing, because we truly believe that God did not create people to be murdered or to kill each other or to be tortured or to be persecuted in their lives, but God the Almighty has made us to be able to defend ourselves. This is why we need to really enshrine this in ourselves and in our children through education and learning, and through working on legislations and laws that do not allow us to use the name of God in order to persecute others or to use it for hate and terrorism. The second recommendation, no prejudice and repeating history's mistakes. We really only look to the mistakes of the history in order to see how we are failing in building a future. But His Holiness the Pope has said these very strong words: we need to build the future together, or we will not be having any future. Religions in particular cannot abandon their duty of building bridges between peoples and cultures. It is time for all religions to dispense themselves with bravery and with no appearances to help all the human family in order to be able to reconcile and have a more optimistic view of the future and take tangible steps. The third recommendation, no obligation or intolerance. His Holiness talks about the UAE by saying, I want to truly appreciate, I salute how this country has guaranteed the right of adoration, raising people on tolerance and true speeches and dialogues with others, while retaining all the principal rights and notably freedom of religion and veneration, will help us in building a better future together so that we can build a true culture. The fourth recommendation, there shouldn't be any dual values. Our maturities lead us to adopting justice, and we need to stop any duality in our systems, and we need to live as Voltaire said. I do not agree with what you said, but I will defend your right to say whatever you say until death. So is it possible for some peoples to demonstrate, because in another country, for example, it was not allowed to have a mosque being built, and these same peoples revolt when a church is being restored in their own countries? The fifth recommendation, nobody should be obligated to have any religious belongings, and we need to have freedom of religions. We had a document that determines the freedom of everything, and the freedom of belief is a cornerstone of a modern society, and it has been clearly dedicated by all the legal and constitutional documents. If you make someone follow your own religion, you are not respecting your own religion. The sixth recommendation, implementing the citizenship rights. The Human Fraternity document says that citizenship is built on equality in obligations and rights that anyone can benefit from. And Al-Azhar al-Sharif on the 1st of March 2017, a declaration which dedicates the framework to have coexistence between Muslims and Christians in Arab countries, and reiterates the principles of citizenship and abhors hate and intolerance. The document says adopting citizenship, equality and rights also require to condemn any measure that goes against citizenship And the first principles of that is to have a constitutional nation based on citizenship, equality, and the rule of law. The seventh recommendation, the necessity to promote women's rights as well as children's rights and those of the minorities and the sick and special needs. Every country is being measured in how much it can protect its weak. This is why the document says how important it is to preserve the rights of women, children, seniors, and people of determination or people with special needs. The eighth recommendation is to have mercy. The COVID-19 pandemic has threatened social justice, and we know that it has led to a lot of economic and social crises, and we are all calling to adopt the principle of social justice, which is based on mercy, and thus giving a special consideration for the poor and the people in need. The ninth recommendation, dialogue is necessary and the true need. We are not abdicating truth or our own identity or religious or historic identity. His Holiness the Pope of the Catholic Church in the International Peace Conference in Al-Azhar on the 18th of April 2017 in Cairo, that we are all called to dialogue, and notably to start a religious dialogue, to be able to work together. And we do believe that the future of everyone is also related to the cultures and religions meeting each other halfway, and we need to have a smooth transition. And if we coordinate together, this might help us in building a better dialogue. We need to be brave in accepting our differences. We need to have good intentions. We need to preserve our identity, because we cannot start a true dialogue in ambiguity or sacrificing what is good in order to please others. We need to be brave in our differences, because we shouldn't deal with people who are different from me culturally or religiously as an enemy. But I need to accept him as a friend, and I need to be convinced that the good of each individual is based in the good for everyone. We need to have true and good intentions, because we know that dialogue is how people express themselves. It is not a strategy to have secondary objectives, but we need to adopt it in order to have competitiveness become coordination and cooperation. The 10th recommendation, we need to start from ourselves. Everyone depending on his role in society, because we know that the greater change is changing oneself and not only changing the institutions. We need to change humans and not our buildings. We need to change our behavior and not the behavior of others. The Human Fraternity document specifies that we who believe in God and who believe in the day of judgment and who believe in our religious and moral responsibilities, and through this document we demand ourselves to respect others than the leaders, dignitaries, and others. In conclusion, I would truly like to extend my thanks and appreciation to the state of the UAE for hosting such a symposium, and for every single person that have been organizing this symposium, including Trans Research and Advisory, in addition to Al-Ittihad newspapers. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Monsignor, for such a valuable speech that has very important points. But we know that peace is something that we need to work towards. Thank you so much for these. We have also been good to hear from someone who has been present during the Human Fraternity document. Now we move Dr. Omar Al-Darhi, the Acting Director General of the UAE Sharia Fatwa Council, the Executive Director of Islamic Affairs from the UAE. You have the floor. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Peace and 1,000 peace on all of you today, on all the dreams of a better world. I would like to start by extend my thanks as well as my appreciation for whoever organized this symposium, and I would like to thank the Al Ittihad newspaper for surging such deep vision, as well as for its noble history, as well as trans research and advisory for their important work. I shouldn't also forget the gathering we have today. We know that today we are improving this land of tolerance. So I would like to thank Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan for his participation as well as his word. I would also like to thank His Excellency Monsignor Ioannis for these practical recommendations that he was able of taking from the Human Fraternity document. Ladies and gentlemen, spreading tolerance and peace is a human obligation that is sanctified. God, when he created Adam, gave him a very specific mission, a mission that we have also been given, which is to build this world. So do you believe that this God who gave us this mission will lead us to having any war, or is he going to help us in stopping hatred? The world today, with its interconnectedness and its openness, is a need to the values of peace and improving tolerance and understanding and stopping any discourse of hate and extremism. And the message of God is the message of peace, and we need to live and tolerate each other, and we need to safeguard it and respect it. It is truly an honor to see that we can only build this world through peace. This is the International Day of Peace, and we are now celebrating it. And we know that it is just the cornerstone for international peace and for our urging to have international peace. And we need to help on helping all religions spreading peace. And we need to work on future strategies to enshrine human fraternity and to live in peace in all nations. We know that religious discourse today is called in order to respect peace in all the mosques, in all the churches, and all the temples and synagogues, and from everywhere. Man in this life is in need of peace. He might face several moments where between having peace and when having what he has, and he will always choose peace. We know that peace is God, and we need to pray for him, and this will be enough and will protect us from any danger. This is why Imam al-Razi says there is no doubt that this world has a lot of fears and concerns, but if man has been capable of reaching out to another man, and his most important mission is to know that he is in peace and safe, they will be able to work together. And this is why we always start by saying, may peace be upon you. The peace is building bridges with others, and we need to safeguard it in order to stop all the wars. And this word will find its way to our heart in order to help us in loving each other and accepting each other. And we know that peace is one of the name of God. Peace is not a word or a slogan that we brand. It is a daily feeling that we need to live every single moment. It starts with us from our birth until going to school, and from his prayers to God, and by saying his blessings to each other, and by praying to others, so that he can remain in peace, so that he can live in blessing and in serenity. The Muslim in particular, and man has been living in peace from birth to his death, just like in Prophet Yahya, peace be upon him, when he comes to this world and when he leaves it. And peace and blessings on everyone. is related to peace. In the Holy Quran, we know that the peace on all the prophets. It is also a peace on Moses and Harun and on Abraham. And we know that this peace includes all the previous nations and all the ancient prophets. God said to our prophet, may the peace be upon you and upon the believers, and in our prayers and all our greetings we spread peace, because we meet love. Everyone, we say peace upon you and on others. And our prophet say, may the peace be upon him. Those who greet others like that will find his way to heavens. We know that everyone is calling for peace, and the names of these prophets have been correlated with peace. On this International Day of Peace, we really send our appreciation to the state of the UAE, my country of birth, this state that has been leading this region and the world towards peace and tolerance, and it has worked on the historic document, the Human Fraternity document, because we know that humanity stems from this land and from this territory. We have an exemplary life in peace where everyone is respected, and whoever lives on this land who will not only receive their rights but also more than that, in addition to the blessings of God. The peace is an individual responsibility, and we know that this responsibility for many is instinctive, and the UAE has chosen to have the value of peace and have decided to be a center for peace because it believes that the value of peace should be spread all around the world and with all different creatures. The UAE is the country of peace, and it's the culture of peace and the people of peace that has been born in this peace. And we know that this nation and this Ittihad is a nation of peace, and we need to have peace with ourselves and with the others, and this peace has no alternative and will not change. And we know that it is our leading star, and we will continue to have all these values and work on all the mutual interests that we have, because we know that peace does not marginalize anyone. The UAE respects everyone from all different confessions, from all different religions, and has also laws that criminalize intolerance and hate. And we know that it uses all the values that we have inherited from Sheikh Zayed, because he is the one that have set all the pillars that we are basing this nation on. And we know that he has lived here and he has spread his blessings. Today there are more than 200 nationalities living in UAE, living in peace and tolerance and with each other. I think I have overstepped on my time. Thank you so much for everything. I do wish that all the speeches were similar to what you give us, because we know that a lot of religious leaders should be having such speeches. We heard both what Monsignor and His Excellency Dr. Omar said, and I hope that everyone can be that. We now move on to Dr. Sultan Faisal Al-Maithi, the Secretary General to the Muslim Council of Elders. Doctor, we wanted you to have with us, but I know that things have been different. We are now listening to you. Hello, everyone from Amman and Jordan. Your Excellencies, I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Ahmed Al-Kaabi. I'm sorry, Mr. Hamad Al-Kaabi, as well as Monsignor Yohannes Lahdi Gaid, who has worked on the Human Fraternity document, as well as Sheikh Sawafi. I am now tackling a subject that is related to human civilization in general. Spreading peace and the culture of peace is quite important, and peace and tolerance are also crucial, because we know that the world is in need of spreading peace, and it is at the essence of any attempt to improve human life. Honorable guests, we know that there are three things on which civilization is based. One, having natural resources or human resources. Second, creativity and innovation in management and strategy and planification. And three, adopting good morals and good values, whether individually or on the collective level. We know that humanity is moving forward. Its history has evolved, and this will be measured by how important it is to have a social plan and values based on cooperation, coordination, and mutual respect. And we know that sometimes it failed because of conflicts or differences, as well as extremism and other hate speeches. But now, all the UN reports now measure peace and prosperity with the measures of peace, of cooperation, communication, tolerance, and equality. These are true measures and benchmarks. Since they are now the benchmarks that lead to attracting investment, prosperity, as well as local and international markets, my goal is to say that tolerance and human fraternity are not only slogans, they are not just expressions that we use in our speeches. They are at the core of our lives, of our improvement and evolution, and they need to exist. There are a lot of states today that have resources and planification, but it has been brought down by wars. I do not want to give any examples, but we all know on which state I'm mentioning. Human history, and I'm trying to be as concise as possible. We know that there has been centuries of starting with agriculture, then industry, and now the computer age. Now we are living the post-industrial world, and now globalization calls for human fraternity that trespasses and overcomes all the previous suffering. But unfortunately, so far it has failed. We know that now hate speech has been spread on the internet, and it has spread to more differences between identities and led to civil wars, and has weakened the links that we have with other cultures. And in light of this reality, the world started to feel how important it is to have peace and tolerance, and that for the evolution and the development of the people. And this is why we hold several symposiums that debate this matter continuously. This indicates that peace and coexistence and human fraternity today are a request and a need that humanity should seek. Furthermore, honorable guests, today in the Muslim Council of Elders, with Dr. Ahmad Al-Tayyib from Al-Azhar, we try as much as possible to work on several points, including a long-term method in order to find a radical solution to all conflicts, and to finding a solution that was started by Al-Imam in his international conferences, as well as the symposiums with all religious leaders from around the world, at the head of which His Holiness the Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis. And these measures have led to an improvement to all of us in order to achieve coexistence and peace amongst people and cultures and communities. This was my foreword in brief. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I do believe that we have an intervention about the history of coexistence and tolerance. I do believe that everyone wants to have peace and tolerance amongst all peoples. And now it is a demand for all of us. Thank you so much, Dr. Faisal, for this intervention. We really wish you to have you amongst ourselves to give us much more information that you have already provided for us. So thank you so much for that. We now move on to His Excellency Mr. Maqsood Cruz, the Strategic Communication Consultant at the Ministry of Presidential Affairs in the UAE, about promoting a culture of tolerance and peace through human rights. You have the floor.
Of course, we embrace peace, and I would like to say, peace be upon you, people who are attending with us and those who are following us. Allow me to speak in English.
Your Excellency Sheikh Nahyan bin Mubarak Al Nahyan, Cabinet Member and Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence in the United Arab Emirates, Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, and distinguished guests. Allow me to begin by expressing my sincerest appreciation and utmost gratitude to Dr. Muhammad Al Ali, CEO and founder of the New Trends Research and Advisory, and also Mr. Hamad Al Kabi, Editor-in-Chief of Al Ittihad newspaper, for their wonderful and kind and generous invitation to participate in such an exceptional and timely symposium on what we need to do in order to promote the culture of peace and tolerance in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take you with me back in time for more than 40 years ago, when a young German man, blonde with green eyes, decided to go to Abu Dhabi, which is a promising island that is yet going to be the capital of tolerance of the United Arab Emirates. When he arrived, he saw that beautiful brown Bedouin, which was for him love from first sight. He tried to approach her and speak to her, but everyone told him that this is not allowed here. However, if he is sincere in his love, then he should go and ask for her hand from her father. The young German man decided to visit her father and formally ask for her hand. The father obviously was shocked to receive this unusual request, so he wanted to get rid of him by putting 3 conditions. First, he should convert to Islam if he wants to marry his daughter. Second, he should pay a generous amount of dowry. Third, he needs to provide a suitable house. The young man disappeared for a few weeks and then returned back. He converted to Islam, got the dowry, and provided the house. So the old man was overwhelmed with his commitment and gave his blessing finally to the marriage. The result of this marriage is 3 children. I am number 2. I often ask people who know about my story, how do you classify me? Am I white or black? Am I European or Arab? Am I Christian, Muslim, Chrislam, or all of the above? Well, Socrates, the great philosopher, once said in ancient times, I'm not an Athenian nor a Greek, I'm a citizen of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the ethos of my personal story would never have been possible if it was not based on the ideals of tolerance, pluralism, and coexistence that are engraved in the DNA of the social fabric of the UAE in both citizens, residents alike. Such ideals cannot be actualized without the deep understanding of the necessity of preserving the human dignity as exemplified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on the 10th of December 1948. I argue that in order for all of us to succeed in the promotion of a culture of tolerance and peace worldwide, we need to hold the values and principles of human rights at the highest regard. thus transforming these ideals into our day-to-day practices at the institutional, societal, and personal levels within the spirit of the international human rights law. In my view, there is a need for a global, progressive vision for humanity that is based on a holistic approach that concentrates on the promotion of world peace, moderation, and diversity, the enhancement of legislative infrastructure and international cooperation in which human rights are at the heart of such a vision. Thus, seeking our shared future through our shared values for harmony and inclusivity, in which compassion, acceptance, and respect are the pillars of a true sense of cohesion. Our collective wisdom and joint efforts should be geared towards the implementation of such a vision by developing long-term prevention initiatives combined with practical interventions that aim at targeting the root causes of all forms of intolerance, hate, and discrimination across all sectors of society and at the different levels of our community engagement. It is critical, nonetheless, to ensure that our communities are immune to alienation, hate, and ignorance, in which the fear of the other should not be the determining factor of relationships between the different members of any given society. Hence, promote moderation, embrace diversity, encourage innovation, and welcome global exchanges between all cultures, religions, and communities. Now, more than ever, we need to work together in close partnership in order to initiate dialogue, develop policies, launch programs, and create initiatives towards the promotion of a culture of tolerance and peace that is grounded in human rights. Thank you very much.
In the day of tolerance, but allow me to comment on your story, tolerance in the culture and the tolerance in this region, and we were happy to hear your story, your personal story. This happened 40 years ago. I said more than 40 years, and it's up to you to guess. And I mentioned that I am the second child. I was the second child of my father, Mr. Cruz. So don't be fooled by my tricks. You used the event of the celebration of today, and you made your tricks. Anyway, you are joking. Of course, the culture of peace and tolerance will be discussed further. And with us, Levi Dushman, Rabbi Levi Dushman. It is a recorded speech. And of course, this is also another way of discussing this topic. So please, let's start the recording.
Hello, my dear friends. I am deeply honored to have been invited to address this esteemed gathering. I am humbled to have been included amongst the representatives of various faiths practiced by the people of our region. It is in the spirit of peace and tolerance that the hosts have most graciously allowed me to participate by video, recognizing that today, together with Jewish communities around the UAE and around the world, are celebrating the ancient Jewish holiday of Sukkot, which precludes me from joining you in person. In fact, the beautiful week-long festival of Sukkot is the perfect place to begin our discussion of how tolerance and peace and mutual respect and understanding is key to resolving conflicts at home, in the marketplace, and in the more global home, which we call planet Earth. The Jewish holiday of Sukkot is called the time of our rejoicing, and it is known for its emphasis on the theme of unity. During the festival, we leave the comfort of our homes and dwell in simple, greenery-covered outdoor booths, which we call a sukkah, recalling the divine protection our ancestors received as they traveled through the desert from Egypt to the Holy Land. With your permission, I would like to demonstrate and explain one of the beloved rituals which Jewish families around the world do during the holiday of Sukkot. This is the ritual, the mitzvah of the lulav and etrog, where we gather 4 species consisted of a palm branch, a citrus fruit, a myrtle branch, and a willow branch. Each one of these species representing something else. A palm branch, while it has a beautiful taste, it contains no smell. A citrus fruit has both a taste and a smell. A myrtle branch has only a smell but no taste. And you have the willow branch, which has no smell and no taste. Each one of these smell and the taste represents something different. The smell represents a man that does good deeds, that has respects one another, and is someone which is consistent in doing mitzvot. And the taste is one which is a wise man, a learned man. And on the holiday of Sukkot, we take these 4 species together. The species of one which is both learned and does the mitzvot, one that might not do the mitzvot or learned, one which is only learned and does mitzvot, or one that does the mitzvot but is not learned, and we unite them together as one. And this is the message of unity which we have during the holiday of Sukkot. My dear friends, this lesson pertains to individuals as well on a larger scale to nations. Every person and every nation has its strengths. Recognizing each other's strengths as well as our own is the first step in achieving peace. Yes, we are different. We aren't meant to melt into one big bubble that boils away from our uniqueness, but we can still come together in unity, celebrating our similarities as well as our unique gifts. We can learn another important lesson about world peace from the Sukkah holiday. In ancient time, throughout the Sukkot festival, a total of 70 bullocks were sacrificed in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. This stands in sharp contrast to other pilgrimage festivals when the number of sacrifices was in single digits. The Talmud explains that the 70 bullocks of Sukkot corresponds to the 70 nations of the world in their fervent prayers for peace on earth. The Jewish community of old recognizes that peace would be possible only when all nations were represented and recognized. Despite the seeming divisions between us, thanks to technology, we are essentially one world. Technology allows us to share, to communicate, to do business, to understand each other's cultures, to interact as never before. A song, an amazing video, or a words of wisdom can go viral within seconds. But on the flip side, we see devastating illnesses like coronavirus can also literally go viral, causing untold suffering around the world. It is within our power to harness the forces of good to achieve a state of unity. Well, how? By focusing on mutual respect and tolerance. What is tolerance? Does it mean you live your life, I live mine? If you see a fellow human being doing something wrong or harmful to himself or to another, do I just shrug my shoulders and say, live and let live? No. At times, we need to intervene, to lead, to show as an example, to show others the right way. But we must always do this with respect. Let's be honest. Most of us manage to tolerate and excuse our own shortcomings. Likewise, we need to show tolerance and respect to others. We may reject their ideas, but we may not reject them as a person. We just marked the 1-year anniversary of the signing of the Abrahamic Accord, the historic normalization agreements that have led to so many extremely positive developments. The opening of embassies, the appointments of ambassadors, tremendous economic opportunities, a surge in tourism, the launching of flight paths, and other great achievements. We are finally on a pathway leading away from war and conflict towards a new era, an era of tolerance, an era of peace, and an era of opportunity. This is a great significance in naming of these historic agreements after our shared forefather Abraham. Abraham introduced to the world the concept of a single God who loves and cares for all, for every individual on this planet Earth. Abraham had a vision that we continue to place before us today, a world filled with recognition and God and peace between all of the nations. I would like to conclude with a message of gratitude. We are so lucky and thankful to be living in this beautiful country, the United Arab Emirates, a country whose leadership is leading the world in tolerance, coexistence, peace, and prosperity. A country which is leading the world in humanitarian work through UAE Aid, which has helped tens of countries at the beginning of the coronavirus, and more recently through its humanitarian city, helping young refugees, families from Afghanistan. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this event for giving us the opportunity to join you during this day. And once again, I would like to thank for all of you watching, for all of you that are doing something special to promote and to bring forth tolerance and peace amongst all of our communities, amongst our nations, and amongst the entire world. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We thank Rabbi Levi Dushman for his speech. Now we come back to our hall with Dr. Qutb Mustafa Sano. Professor Qutb Sano is the Secretary General of the International Islamic Fiqh Academy. You have the floor. Peace be upon you, and peace be upon his Prophet and his companions. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you all. Allow me in the beginning to tell you that my speech will be different from your speeches. Yeah, we need the difference. And let me start by share with you a Quranic verse, and this verse gathers everything that we are discussing in this symposium in this day, which is celebrated as the Day of Peace. And this Quranic verse is among his verses is creating skies and earth and creating you humans, and these are signs for you all as humans and creatures and worlds. And some interpret this verse by saying that those who are well versed in how to populate the earth, they are held responsible in promoting peace and tolerance. And this Quranic verse tells us that difference is something that is cosmic, that has always been the aim. And of course, this reflects that Almighty God wants us to be different, but at the same time to have common objectives and to have a mutual respect, and every difference that turns into conflict or violence, this is not the difference that Allah created us for. As Almighty Allah created the different tongues and different cultures and different aspects of knowledge that we acquire, and also created the colors, and these colors embody, of course, the differences and accepting differences. All these aspects and components are signs by Allah that tell us that we should be living together in this globe in a cooperative way and collaborative way despite our differences. And when we move from this diversity and difference to conflictual contradictions, at that time we see problems arise. It's why we see different problems and conflict arise today. And of course, this includes the behaviors and some knowledge that are acquired by the person in their environment, and they are influenced by the beliefs and lead them to act in a way that is contradictory with the Sunnah of Allah. And I like the word of Monsignor who said that no one kills another one in the name of Allah, because Allah created us not to kill each other, otherwise He could not have created our humanity. So this conflict can be overcome through promoting peace, tolerance, in order to prevent their recurrence, to stop the culture of conflict. And I am happy to see that the United Arab Emirates named a ministry for the first time in history that is dedicated for promoting tolerance, which means that we are not talking here in the UAE theoretically, but only practically. This ministry will present to the societies what they need, because when there is a need for agriculture, there is a Ministry of Agriculture. Economy, there is a Ministry of Economy. And this ministry also will nurture the value and virtue of tolerance, and we are in dire need of such entities. And I am happy to see this collaboration between Trends Research and Advisory and Al Ittihad newspaper. You agreed to move from a theory about peace and tolerance to a lifestyle, to something that is a part and parcel of our culture, that we exercise in our homes, in our streets, how to deal with each other. And by doing so, we become real implementers of this value and virtue, and we move by translating this culture of tolerance. So, moving from theory to practice to lifestyle, when we talk about tolerance, this is the ultimate objective, because by doing so, we make tolerance a lifestyle and a compass that can be followed by everyone. And I like this linkage between tolerance and peace. And let me conclude by the hadith of the Prophet, who said, "You will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love each other." Let me orient you to something. If you do it, you will love each other. Say peace upon you between each other. And we do not mean here only the greetings that we use with each other, but feeling safe, even when I am with you and you say peace be upon you. It's not just a theory, but it means that when I am with you, peace is with you, so you feel safe. So peace leads to love. And of course, the structure of the term peace be upon you means that I am with you, you should feel safe. And this, of course, brings tranquility with everyone we greet, even if they are different than us, which means that despite the fact that he or she is different, we are safe together. He is safe, she is safe, and it is necessary that we are resembling each other to coexist with each other. I think that we know for sure that not all conflicts can be fought through tanks and missiles, but through dialogue, because when we resolve conflict violently, we do bad to the humanity and not the good. And I'd like to conclude by saying that if each and every one of us tried to leave peace inside and tries to translate it when dealing with those close to them and with everyone, by doing that, the world becomes a safe place, a tolerant place, and a peaceful world. And here lies the importance of this historic document, which I attended, this human fraternity, which will be celebrated by history, and of course, especially given those who signed it, and this document which dared to be announced to the world by those who represent the major Abraham religions. So let's move together to tolerance, to peace. Let's move from theory to practice when we talk about tolerance and peace. Let's live it in our lifestyle. Let's breathe peace and tolerance and embrace it in our behaviors, in our dialogue. Only then conflicts will disappear between peoples and nations. Thank you very much. And I hope that this event are repeated in order to continue such fruitful discussions. And we are responsible to discuss this. These are signs to all of us, those who are attending with us and those who will participate with us in promoting this culture. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your speech. You scared us in the beginning when we said that you will share something different, but in my opinion, you were not different. We heard the philosophy about tolerance and peace, and it's highly valued. Thank you very much. Now we move to Dr. Muhammad Kamil Al-Ma'ini, the founder and president of International Institute for Cultural Diplomacy.
We will be talking about cultural diplomacy as well as soft power. The UAE is considered one of the bigger actors in the region and in the world, and it has become a model for coexistence, peace, and tolerance for a lot of culture from around us. And we are built on love and understanding. And it worked on cultural diplomacy that the UAE is promoting through its cultural activities as well as educational conferences and symposiums and arts and music, as well as maintaining our traditions and customs, because this is how we work on improving dialogue and coexistence between everyone in our society. Professor Nye and other from the new neoliberal school of cultural diplomatic relations is that we need to have published a book that says that if we count on each other as countries, it will decrease all armed conflicts. And we see that the states that have suffered previously from that have started to promote their own culture as well as the institution, and to have institutions working on cooperation and coordination. We know that the soft power is quite important and makes others implement what we want without having to force them to do that. Cultural diplomacy, which is one of the soft power strategies, because we know that everyone is clear about what is soft power, because we know that the power, soft power, is one aspect of global strategies. And we need to abide by it in order to have peace and stability in the world. It is a bridge that everyone should go on through in order to have beautiful human values. And it has different cultural activities in order to promote the national activities. Nathan Cummings said that this is spreading ideas as well as sharing beliefs in terms of culture, which will include in having coexistence and understanding. We believe in the International Institute for Cultural Diplomacy that this was used for diplomacy and improving all cultural values from the Emirates and outside its borders in a way that will respond to its international interest in order to help everyone understand, regardless of how different they are, that it is necessary to have cooperation and coordination and coexistence between everyone in the international community. And we need also have to work on bridges of communication. The culture of diplomacy has 5 pillars. It is morals that we are all trying to have. We need to understand and promote multicultural aspects as well as the mutual understanding. You have to cooperate and coordinate with several countries and peoples. We need to work on peace and international security and promoting them. When it comes to cultural diplomacy, we can say that it is work on independent and semi-independent, such as the Putin Institute, as well as the British Council, and other, as well as the Trends Research and Advisory. We know also that multinationals, as well as major economic and trade companies, which employ people from different cultures and communities, and it helps them into having a good table time in order to help everyone to work. And this is one of the most important ways of cross-cultural understanding. We know that the private sector companies also have been working in hosting several events, whether in the local communities in which it is working or with the international community, because it is offering different ways of interacting with different culture, and it is a way of how to allow others to participate with us and share our point of view. We know there is a citizenship in terms of cultural diplomacy. So whoever is representing a state in international conferences or events or symposium, this represents a sort of cultural diplomacy. We know that communication, as well as social media, as well as the tourism diplomacy. We heard that we had a conference in India under the title The Diplomacy of Beauty. And the International Institute organized it. And we talked about beauty, attractiveness, and all these matters. So we focus on the aesthetics of tourism, of coexistence, of mutual interest, of liberty, of religions and others. We did that through theater, arts, media, as well other means that help us attract other people and help in bringing people together through building good relations with everyone for a better life. We need also to understand really what's happening, which is a harmonization, a beauty and aesthetics between, for example, dancers that sway to the beautiful songs and the music, as well as the cooperation of light and others. We need also to understand how we need to work despite our differences in culture and race, of gender or categories, etc. During the diplomacy conference, we also said that water brings people together, and it is a source of harmonization instead of being a source of conflict. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity in order to be able to offer you our aspect of soft power and cultural diplomacy. Thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad Kamal Al-Maani. We see that Dr. Rashid might comment on that later on. We know that there are a lot of cultures and diplomacy will also bring these people together. We now move on to ways to promote a culture of peace and tolerance in the region and the world. We were supposed to have His Excellency Dr. Ali Rashid Al Noami, but he couldn't make it. He is outside the country, but unfortunately he said that he will not be able to make it today. They are now in Munich, and they have many things to deal with there. And this is why they send the regrets of not being able to partake with us. Thank you so much. This might be best in order to be able to respect the time that we have. I now move to Dr. Fatouh Haikal, the political advisor and head of the scientific research sector at Trans Research and Advisory. Dr. Haikal, you only have 10 minutes. It's not because we have other colleagues not coming here that you have much more time than that. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you and in the entire world. First and foremost, allow me to extend my thanks to Trans Research and Advisory as well as Al Ittihad newspaper for this initiatives in order to hold a symposium, which is quite important for us all, which is no less important than the event that coincides with our day, which is the International Day for Peace. I heard several interventions about one single truth, which is that spreading the truth of peace and tolerance, as well as working on its basis, is the responsibility of everyone without any exception. This mission needs to harness all our political, educational, journalistic, and religious efforts. It is also quite important, and we need to deal with it as the foremost priority for us all on both the official and the non-official aspects, because we know that this is the best way in order to face the dangers and obstacles that the humanity in its entirety is facing. Whether these related to how we have more extremism as well as the distortion of sending such an image, as well as civil conflicts from around the world that now threaten the sovereignty of other countries, in addition to environmental and health crises that are cross and transnationalist and that need a lot of cooperation instead of conflicts, because there is no tolerance and peace culture in those countries. What I'm quite interested in is talking about the countries in which think tanks can work in order to improve peace and tolerance throughout the world. It is a very important role, but in light of the very constrained time that I have, I will mention some of its more important points. One, the think tanks are considered the most important organizations in helping decision makers on several levels through its recommendations and plans and roadmaps and research. Thus, it plays a very vital point in improving the governmental policies in order to improve the interest of the peoples of those countries as well as the world. Thus, the think tanks, through what is offering in recommendations, ideas in improving the trends that lead to peace and tolerance. They can also work on offering plans and strategies to safeguard this goal. And we know that there are tons of think tanks that specialize in the dialogue of civilization as well as peace and spreading the culture of peace and culture and tolerance. Second, research, cultural and think tanks work in promoting the opportunities to meet and between intellectuals, researchers, and analysts from around the world. This will, no doubt, contribute in bridging the gap between the differences in the people from this intellectual and educated category that represents several communities, as well as fighting platforms to have a constructive and efficient dialogue that will promote understanding others and thus the culture of peace and tolerance. Here, I would like to talk about our own experience in trans research and advisory, because we know that this think tank really tries to be a point of contact between us and the rest of the world, and to have a constructive ways of thinking by having several events that we organize with the participation of researchers and experts from all around the world, as well as the strategic partnership that we signed with the international and regional think tanks, which have reached 90 partnerships in less than 2 years. In addition to that, there are other activities that try to have a positive environment to exchanging ideas that include the intellectuals and try to improve and to find this, our work in order to find a solution to what's happening in the region. We are also trying to find a mutual platform in order to be able to face the international challenges as well as spreading the culture of peace and tolerance. Third, think tanks and research centers play a pivotal role in stopping all hate speech, because we know, amongst the communities and the people, through dismantling these extremist ideas and showcasing how dangerous it is for local, regional, and international peace and security, as well as raising awareness about the truth about these hate speeches and raising the presenting recommendations for dignitaries and officials and decision makers in order to face these hate speeches. At the Trans Research and Advisory, we really had a special experience by holding several symposiums and events, as well as having several activities to dismantle these extremist ideas. And we have working in more than 16 languages and around the world in order to tackle this issue. Moreover, there are other think tanks and religious and cultural institutions that are also working in a similar role, including the Hadaya Center that was established and that has a very important role in that regard. Fourth, think tanks and research centers have a very important social role in the spreading peace and tolerance through their activities and scientific and educational activities that will attract the people, whether they are locally or regionally, in order to promote the human rights and how to safeguard them and improve them. This is when it comes to the positive aspect, but despite all of that, we know that there is another aspect to think tanks. And despite the importance of think tanks and the cultural centers and research centers in promoting peace and security, we need to look at the negative role that some think tanks can play in this regard, including trying to work with the extremist individuals, whether from the Islam politics or the right-wing parties, as well as the centers that defend these groups and promote their ideas, whether intentionally or non-intentionally. We know that some centers have adopted the ideas that do not promote peace and tolerance, but works on dominance, expansionism, as well as meddling in other affairs under the slogans working on national unity and improving our strength. This is one aspect that sometimes does not lead to building peace. There is always a need to have the bridges of peace, as well as interconnecting think tanks, as well as the local communities, in order to improve mutual ideas and common grounds, in order to have the culture of peace and tolerance and spread it throughout the world as something that is quite important to everyone and to all peoples. In order to respect the time, I will just stop here. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you. Thank you so much, Dr. Haikal. You have really raised a really important idea about think tanks and the research centers spreading the culture of peace and tolerance. I really try to salute the roles of trans researchers and advisories through the different plans and books that they have published, as well as symposiums such as today. And I would like to add to your point, we know that Al-Ittihad as a media has also played such an important role in that regard. Furthermore, I do believe that one of the symposiums was held under the same title. So I do believe that think tanks play both a positive and negative role, but we will, of course, focus on the positive role. I now move on to Dr. Radwan Al-Sayed, but I'm sorry, he exited himself, and now towards a common vision of a more peaceful and tolerant world, Dr. Rashid Al-Khayoum, author and researcher from the Republic of Iraq. Thank you so much. I made a research on calling for peace in the Arab world and some foreign countries, because we know that our region, in truth, when people write about it or about its history, it is a history of violence, of wars, as if there was nowhere agriculture or trade or commerce or education and literature in our countries. But we cannot have these without a culture of peace. You mentioned that we know that peace is a very broad word and that we need to fund it. And there are many things following it. But we know that we have tasted what war is, and we know that there has been a lot of talks about that. But when can we send other messages? When we only talk about power, we know that we are now just trying to influence an image of a country, and we know that it is not accepted. And we know that they are trying to remove any ideas we have of the peace, and we know that it is not always sustainable. And we know that this might lead to very bad ideas about this region. According to the news, we know that these were quite officials that were kicking on this idea, calling for peace. And the first calling for peace historically, and whose write it was Amin Ummi, that he wrote. We know that this poet was addressing the people. I know I only have 10 minutes, although I've conducted many research about this subject. I have been working on a week for this paper in front of me. No, don't worry, we will respect the allocated time. Who said that we need to realize peace? He talking about Ibn Sina and Ibn Anf. We know that they have partook in a war that lasted for 40 years. But Zuhur ibn Salman, he played the role of a historian, and I do believe that the poetry is much more honest than history, because it reflects a direct event. In this poem, we know that how he has wrote about an action of peace, and when he said with the money and with the resources and with other people, he is splitting them. We know that Ashur al-Hurum is a social event, and someone has offered that. Do you believe why we do have that? Al-Imam Abu Hamd al-Ghazali described it as being quite important. In Ashur al-Hurum, if you find the person who killed your father, you need to salute him and greet him. Why did they talk about the month of Hurum? For agriculture and to be able to breed troops and cattle, and because they knew that building and urbanization is related to peace, whereas destruction is related to war. And the opposite of peace is not only war, the opposite of peace is hatred. It is intolerance. During these months, they also stop giving capital punishment for everyone, and they stop all kind of hatred, and they open their markets. Now heard about Souq Ukaz. Why was it opened only during the month of Hurum? Because if they were pillaged and stolen from, it is during war, and we know that even thieves have morals, and they stopped their raids, and they did not steal during these months. I now move on to the modern age. The first one who called for peace before the World War I was Mr. William Thomas Strait. He was one of the victims of the Titanic. If Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma has wrote about Haram ibn Sinan as well as Ibn Auf, we know that now they have talking about those who are calling for peace, and without this poet, we wouldn't have known anything about those that called for peace and the one who drowned with the Titanic victims on the 15th of April, 1920. 1912. Do you know that was that a caller for peace, although that now he is now lost? Because that person was calling for peace. During World War II, there was a group of intellectuals that have the International Peace Council. In the beginning, they met in Paris, and then it was headquartered in Paris. After that, they met in Norway. After that, they met in Helsinki, and they have the Helsinki Statement, which is to stop war, to stop it from taking place again, and to stop nuclear arms. So to stop the production and proliferation of nuclear arms. During this Peace Council, Picasso participated. And Picasso drew in 1950 a painting about the Poor Council, and it was the basis of the Peace Council from around the world. And we know that the slogan was, this is the dove of peace. But why was the world divided between the East and the West? And they also have the socialism and the capitalism. So this peace movement was accused of being more affiliated with the Soviet Union as well as the Eastern Bloc. This is why in the capitalist world, there is now did not know how to deal with that. One of the most important presidents was the physicist Corey, who was a Swedish, and one of the most important president is Chandra, who was of Indian nationality. I just wanted to tell you about Dr. Abdel Karim. He was a member of the International Peace Council, and he signed on the Stockholm Agreement, and Muhammad Mahdi al-Jawahiri has signed this agreement in addition to Picasso. He saluted them, and he was elected as president of the Peace Council. The other religious officials have accused him of being a leftist, of being against religion, etc., etc., because he intervened in this movement. He said in Baghdad on the 14th of April in 1959, the year he died. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, may the peace be upon you, bringer of peace, you who love gratitude for all humanity and for your countries especially. I ask God to give you blessings in your work, and that He will enable you to work with all His children. And you need to love God, and you need to love all that those who adore Him, because those who love God will also love the God, and He will bless you, and He has sent you the angels to help you with your brethren in order to stop all wars and to save humanity from the atomic and hydrogen bombs. Another Sheikh Muhammad al-Shabibi was also someone who called for peace. He was going to all different platforms in order to do that. But a military coup, as well as the political conflict, has stopped this movement, as it only remained in our history. Today, on the 21st of September, the UN celebrates the International Day of Peace. There is no phenomena without any history. Thank you so much for listening. We know that some people that are intolerant and they need to understand that in war there shouldn't be any people killed, and we need to work on a more peaceful world. I have a very simple question. Since you have talked about Picasso, who drew the dove of peace, why did he choose the dove? We know that the dove is enshrined in the culture because it is the dove that Noah sent from his arch. The dove went back, whereas the crow did not, and the dove went back with the olive branch. So this is why its significance in bringing peace. We have the last intervention, which is also recorded. It will be for Mr. Eli Epstein, the President and Managing Director of the Amenco Resources LLC from the US.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Many thanks to Trends for the invitation to participate in this symposium. And I begin by saying how much I appreciate the title, Promoting the Culture of Peace and Tolerance in the World, What We Need to Do. And I would like to suggest a very small modification to the title. What we need to do might be added or changed to what each of us needs to do individually. I say that because history has shown us that individuals make a big difference, especially insofar as the Emirates is a country of young people with great aspirations and dreams. And I think that if each of you makes a small effort, you not only will change your life for the better, but improve the world as well. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about my own journey, and hopefully some of that can be extrapolated to your own circumstance. I was born in America to parents who were Holocaust survivors, and as a result of their experience, I grew up in a world that was insulated and isolated from people who were not exactly like us. And by that I mean observant Jews, mostly Holocaust survivors, Yiddish being their first language, and a deep-seated suspicion of anyone who is not exactly like us. And that handicapped me and many of my generation because we never were really exposed to many other types of people, races, religions, and nationalities. It wasn't until I was a young man in graduate school that I met and really entered into a relationship with my first Muslim colleague, somebody who I met in business school. And my journey since then has been one of discovery of the other, discovery of other people, but also in a very meaningful way, discovery of myself and my own values. I would like to tell you a little bit about that in general, and then in particular about my 33 years of working in the UAE. Firstly, I think it's fair to say that for all of us, we tend to want to gravitate to people who are just like us, people who have our values and maybe our religious beliefs. People we're most comfortable with are people we hang out with, who we have learned from our neighborhoods, from our families, from our mosques and churches, people who seem like us in many different ways. But the irony is, you really can't learn that much from people who are exactly like you. It tends to reinforce all that you believe about yourself and things that you believe about others. When you start to get when you start getting out of your comfort zone and meeting others who are different, that's when you begin to understand what humanity is about and what other values and value systems are about. In my own case, it wasn't until I really began traveling to the UAE back in the late 1980s that I encountered Muslims up front and began to understand much about their own faith, religion, practices, lifestyles. I was then CEO of a company that manufactured a petroleum byproduct, and we had acquired some assets from British Petroleum, and part of the existing customer base was in a place and a location none of us had heard of at the time. It was called Dubai. And that, if you can imagine, back in the 1980s, was typical of many people in the United States. I was very apprehensive when I began traveling here, traveling to Dubai. But slowly over time, the relationships that I had blossomed, and I found people who were as curious about me and my background as I was about them. It was a journey of great discovery and surprise and enormous satisfaction. I will say that in a very general sense, my life changed because of my exposure to the UAE. I found people to be not just open and tolerant, but actually respectful of the others, even though they were still learning about my background, my Jewish heritage. And I, in turn, not only was exposed to much about what they were about, but it changed me as a human being, as an American, and as a Jew. In fact, I practice my Judaism and pray differently today because of my exposure to Islam. And I share that with everyone else who I encounter. I regarded my role as a child towards my parents differently when I saw how my Muslim friends were relating to their parents and eventually actually to mine as well. There's a great DNA message in the UAE, and that message is one of openness and respect for others. And I will tell you that I've learned to appreciate but also realize that the word tolerance, which appears in the title of your assignment, Peace and Tolerance, should be a word that triggers a sense of dissatisfaction, not just of aspiration. Tolerance is something which I believe you do when you have no other choice. When you have a toothache on a Saturday morning and the dentist is out until Sunday or Monday, you can tolerate the pain, but you wish it weren't there. Tolerance is not the highest level. The respect that you have from others is a much higher level and something which is really worth aspiring to. But respect can only come when you learn about the others and you appreciate things about the others, not necessarily to say everything about the other is worthy of respect, because perhaps some things are not understood or fully acceptable, but you will still respect the differences when you learn about the others. So I think the challenge for you individually is to find those encounters, whether in person, which is ideal, or even through social media and the internet, to learn about the others. And by that I mean the culture, the faith, the practice, even the languages, which you will find a great deal of similarities between Hebrew and Arabic. But these are really cousin religions, and in a very real sense, closely related to each other. My message to each of you is to take the DNA which you have all acquired from the late Sheikh Zayed, and to embrace that as an opportunity to go forth in the world, and the leadership which your country has given to you to embrace the other and to understand how open you can be is a gift of enormous importance to you as Emiratis, and in fact to the whole Middle East and the world.
From these interventions, one
محمد يقترح ان نحن استفادة للوقت.
In order to benefit from our time, we will keep our discussions as we go to lunch. That way we will all have an opportunity to be able to deal with the several ideas. And that way, in order to spare any time, if you have any opposition to that, we will open the floor for discussion. I think that everyone agreed to that. So this was the first point. Second, I want to summarize all the points that you have made. I gathered that in 5 points that we need to work together and to work on. We need to work on peace and tolerance, because we know that this is not so only based on establishment and institutions, but only on personal work. We know that the Human Fraternity document has really set the framework for our vision in order to solve all the issues that we might have in the regions. we know that tolerance might be for everyone, and we need to accept it. So these are the main points that I can summarize. I know that there has been a lot of positive points that were being made today in order to understand what we should be able to do. So these are among some things that we did. In conclusion, I do believe that I want to thank you all for succeeding in this session. We have really respected our allocated time, and sorry for not respecting the time. I know that sometimes this happened because we know that this was long for 2 hours, and sometimes we need to break these sessions. Thank you so much, Trans Research and Advisory, for organizing this event today. I also would like to thank the Institute for the different themes and topics. I would also like to thank Al-Ittihad newspaper, which is the strategic partner of Trans Research and Advisory, for trying not to miss any opportunity that we have in order to work on peace and tolerance. And I do believe that we need more and more in our world today. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you for your participation. Do you have any intervention? Yes, allow me to say that personally, I would really like to thank Trans Research and Advisory. You have really welcomed us with all hospitality. And the more we deal with the UAE and the Emiratis, the more we appreciate the peace and tolerance in this region. I would like to thank you for all this help as how you have moderated this session. So thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed.